half hour. Danny managed to make it like a good 33 minutes without saying anything unremarkable. And here at the breakdown, we were kind of like, oh, wow, we're not going to have any material to work with here? This is delightful. But as you saw, she had her thoughts on pharmacare. She also had her thoughts on coal mining.
Energy Minister, I believe, wrote a letter to the CEO of the Alberta Energy Regulator, including a clarification that those 4 projects could still be pursued. So what's going on? Why is this thing just keep coming back? Are we going to have a hard black and white decision, yes or no, on development?
Well, there were 4 advanced projects that had been under consideration. And then the change was made to the coal policy, which I think caused a lot of backlash and anger, because the 1976 coal policy had a whole vast areas that were off limits for development. When it got rescinded, then there were a number of different companies that were going onto pristine land and starting to do some of the initial work to determine whether they could develop. So we reinstituted the coal policy, but there were still those 4 advanced projects that were excluded from that policy because they'd already been disturbed. I think there's a couple up in the Hinton Grand Cache area. There's Tent Mountain and there's Grassy Mountain. And
so hesitant to use the word, but grandfathered would be sort of an application here.
It would, because if you go down and look at those sites, they'd already been disturbed, they'd already been developed, there's already existing infrastructure there, and quite frankly, when they were decommissioned, they were not reclaimed particularly well. And so I think there's been some appetite in the community to get them reclaimed properly and to reconsider whether or not they should also be mined at the same time. So that's why those 4 projects had been given a carve-out when the new coal policy came back in, to see whether there was some local support to be able to reopen them, finish the mining, and then reclaim them properly. So we're just letting the process proceed, and wanted to make sure that the AER knew that they could continue looking at those as 4 advanced projects, that there wasn't an intention for that to be part of the reinstatement of the 1976 coal policy. So I'll just let that play out, and they'll have to see if they can get public support, if they can address the environmental issues. Anytime we have a major project, they have to have all of those considerations.
Okay, so that's Danny's thoughts on the coal mining situation, and in particular in regards to Grassy Mountain. Now, if we're talking about Grassy Mountain, we've got to talk about Northback, which is a subsidiary of Hancock Prospecting. And this is where things get kind of silly really quickly. So Hancock is actually an Australian company. It's owned by one of I believe she's the wealthiest woman in Australia. She's worth like billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. Made tons of money in Australia with mining. But Northback is kind of version 2.0 of Hancock Prospecting's work at Grassy Mountain. Now, in 2014, Benga Mining Limited, which is the predecessor company of Northback, started a proposal for the Grassy Mountain coal mine, mining a metallurgical coal mine with a production capacity of a maximum of 4 million tons of coal per year over a mine life of about 25 years. Now, the site that they looked at on Grassy Mountain had previously been a coal mine, but it had been shut down. So this was a new application to go into that space to get the metallurgical coal. That's what that was. Now, in 2020, the UCP rescinded the 1976 coal policy, and they did so without any consultation. And this caused a lot of concern for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, the no consultation part was a pretty big one. But when we're talking about the areas that we're talking about, that's where a lot of water for southern Alberta comes from. And at the same time as this was going on, there were very real concerns about the amount of selenium, which is a byproduct of these mining operations, that was already high in some Alberta rivers because of previous coal mining operations. So selenium, we've heard from a couple folks on who've offered some insight on the show before. It's actually in small doses a good thing, kind of like water. You want the right amount of water. You want to be able to drink some water. But if it's over your head, it's a bad thing. So the poison is in the dose, is a good way to say it. And if there's too much selenium, not only does that go into the water supply, but it also goes into the food supply. It starts to affect agriculture. It starts to affect ranching. All of these things turns into a really big problem really, really quickly. And starting up another coal mine at that site, odds are good, especially when you take a look at the environmental record that this province has, odds are good that there is a very high risk of more selenium leaching into the water supply. As we're heading into a drought in the province of Alberta, that's not great, I think most people would probably say. But because of the public outcry, because of the public campaigns that were put into place immediately after this policy was done, Alberta reverses direction on coal development and reinstated the 1976 policy. Now, with that, they also put in a ministerial order saying, yeah, there's not to be any coal mining in any of these areas. So that's sort of the story so far in regards to how coal mining in Alberta kind of flowed through for a while there. But there were some changes that happened. One of the big things that is relevant to this particular conversation is that in June of 2021, a joint federal-provincial review panel denied Benga's permits needed to resume mining for steelmaking coal at Grassy Mountain. So both the province and the federal government said, "Nuh-uh, you don't get to do the coal mining. Sorry." And by most interpretations, that was the end of that project. And the panel, this is the joint provincial federal panel, said that the environmental effects on fish and water quality would outweigh the project's economic impacts. So that was that. But then Northback came to be because the Benga mine thing, well, the Benga name, that's no good anymore. What if we rebranded and we called ourselves Northback? And then what if we applied for exploration drilling? So they're not actually doing the coal mining yet. What they're wanting to do is drill a bunch of very deep holes in the ground to determine the size of the coal deposit. Now, it's a pretty safe bet to say that if you're going to spend a boatload of money drilling very deep holes in the ground to measure a coal deposit, you're doing that not just for academic reasons. You're doing that because at some point in time, you want to be able to get that coal out of the ground and make a boatload of money. Consequences be damned. There's another piece that's happening concurrently with all of this. Benga and Northback did a very, very good job, and we're going to talk about how in just a sec, of talking about how wonderful this coal mine could be for some people. Not lots of people, but some people. And one of the things that happened is in the course of the decision where the federal government said, no, we're not going to give you a permit for this coal mine, two First Nations said, hey, we don't think that necessarily we got the consultation process that we should. The Piikani and Stoney Nations didn't get the opportunity to speak to the federal government about why they believe that the mine could be a good thing. So there's been a whole court process that has taken place, and now the status of that is the federal government has to do the consultation part with the Piikani and the Stoney in order to say, yeah, we're still not going to do the permit, but we did the consultation because that's how consultation works in Canada. But it's fascinating that it's the Stoney and the Piikani that have said, hey, we'd actually like to have a conversation about how this mine could potentially be a good thing. Now, we get back to the rebranding of the Benga to Northback, because some other things happened in here that are really, really important to understand. The 2002 ministerial order that I referenced earlier restricted coal projects but allowed for exceptions for active coal mines, for advanced projects, and for safety and security activities. The definition of advanced means a project that's already moving through a regulatory process. While Benga did submit documents and go through the regulatory process, that process was rejected in 2021 as not being in the public interest by both the feds and, again, the province. And this was a UCP government at the time. Really important to keep that in mind for context. Unless, of course, you have a minister of energy that decides to write a letter saying, no, I've taken a look at this, and I believe that this is an advanced project. Because Brian Jean decided to write a letter to the Alberta Energy Regulator saying that the project should be considered an advanced project. While all of this has been going on, Northback has still been really quite busy. They have launched an impressive PR campaign that's been going on this whole time. And we want to talk about a couple of the things that they've done. One of the things that most recently caught a lot of people's eye was they made a huge donation, $75,000 donation to a school district, which is kind of sort of a private school district, where they talked about, so it's the Livingston School. No, I'm going to get the name wrong. I'm just going to skip right past it. They donated $75,000 to a lunch program. Now, hopefully that lunch program comes with a whole lot of bottles of water, because that $75,000 is not going to cover the potential damage to the water situation that's going on with the selenium and everything else that could potentially be leaching out. Again, want to highlight both the province and the federal government said the environmental impact is not worth the benefit that would come to the province. So Northback has been going out of their way to convince people, nah, this is actually a really, really good thing. But it's not just the lunch program. And it's kind of fun because they spent $75,000 on this lunch program, and the press release got their name wrong. They said Northback. Now, it's kind of wild that a school district that's in charge of educating kids would get the spelling wrong in their press release for the company that gave them $75,000, but do what you will. This announcement also came with a social media tweet. Today, Northback's presented a $75,000 check to LRSD for our nutrition program and treated students at the school to breakfast. This general donation will help an additional 1,000 students in our division, and every student every day, some hashtags, a link, and some pictures. But here's the thing. When you take a close look at those pictures, there's a familiar face in there. Why, that's Chelsea Petrovich, who is the MLA for Livingston-McLeod. Hey, did Chelsea happen to have any thoughts about whether or not there were any active projects going on in the UCP, in the provincial election?
New coal mining in the eastern slopes, let's say anywhere between the Crow's Nest Pass and Rocky Mountain House, should be a yes or no, I think. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So as it currently stands, there are no active requests in Alberta for coal mines within our eastern slopes.
So in 2023, Chelsea Petrovich, who was running for the UCP, who was hanging around with all the UCP powers that be, was very, very clear. There's no active projects. There's no advanced projects. There's nothing going on. And yet Brian Jean has said, oh, yeah, no, it's a work in progress. But it's not just lunch programs that Northback is doing, They're doing a whole lot more. They're donating to all kinds of different local initiatives. What we have here is a donation of $39,404 under Australia Days. We're celebrating Australia Days in the Crow's Nest Pass, but there's no corporate influence. It's cool, y'all. Northback Australia Day donated $39,404 to the outdoor skate park, but that's not all. They also donated $39,404 to the Crow's Nest Pass Quad Squad. But wait, there's more, because of course there is. Northback also hosts events regularly and has since they became Northback in the Crow's Nest Pass area in Blairmore. So they have a ladies' night at the golf course. You can go and you can play 5 holes. They got prizes. It's cheap. You get a good dinner. They got Easter egg hunts, March 31st. You can get a brunch at the Crow's Nest Pass golf course. They have a Christmas festival brunch sponsored by Northback. It's almost as if, I don't know, Northback, what's the turn of phrase that I'm looking for here? It's almost as if Northback was part of building that golf course. They were. The golf course was recently upgraded in a major way. I think it was 5 holes that were upgraded and moved, and that was done with funding by Northback. So Northback is pouring gobs of money into the Crow's Nest Pass area. And we're talking about a population, when you talk about Crow's Nest Pass, you're talking about a population of about 6,000 people. They're pouring tons of money into this area to try to convince people that they're just the bestest darn company and that everybody should be super comfortable with them ripping apart a mountain and maybe causing toxic amounts of chemicals to go into the water supply that would infect the entire southern half of the province and have massive impacts on agriculture. That's cool though, because they're just so gosh darn nice. And they've been doing a tour as well, because Northback recently appeared to tell a heartwarming story about their lunch program at Fort Macleod.
The piece on the drilling application, and then I'm going to pass it over to Dana, our community relations advisor, and she's going to provide a brief update on a really wonderful piece of work that she's done recently. The vast majority of people opposed to us conducting exploratory drilling program are in Lethbridge, Calgary, or Edmonton. And so, I guess the key message of this slide is that, yes, there's people opposed to us doing this drilling. The vast majority of them wouldn't, directly be impacted by that drilling, whereas the people that would be directly impacted by this project are generally, not entirely, but generally supportive of the project. So I'm just going to pause there before we move on to the next piece of the presentation for Dana to talk to you about the Northback Breakfast Program.
So in the spring of 2023, my then 11-year-old daughter came to me in tears saying, "Mom, there are kids at my school that are hungry." And so she started taking extra snacks with her to school. She was doing everything she could. And in the summer, she said, "Mom, is there something we can do?" And luckily for us, there was. Can you just click the next? So we took the idea to our CEO, and we were able to announce that Northback would partner with Livingston Range School Division by providing $75,000 per year for the Northback Breakfast Program, which will support the Livingston Range School Division Nutrition Program. So this sponsorship will provide crucial resources to ensure the continuity and growth of the nutrition program, which serves healthy food to all the students within Livingston Range School Division. This contribution aligns with our vision of creating a better future and supporting communities and families. So we're really excited for this initiative, and we'll be rolling it out at Livingston School in Lumbrick on March 4th. So very, very proud to be part of this program.
Now, again, that is a corporate initiative that's being designed to create goodwill within the communities that are going to be directly impacted if the drilling goes ahead. That then turns into a coal mine. But inexplicably, that was where Chelsea Petrovich decided to spend her lunch day posing beside the Northback banners. Now, there's some additional context that we got to put in order to make sense of this whole, try to make a little bit of sense of this whole situation. And we're going to go to one of the slides that was actually used in that presentation in Fort McLeod. Because when we're talking about when they want to start drilling, which is as soon as possible, and when we're talking about what they need to do that drilling, we're talking about a lot of water. How much water? Well, according to Northback themselves, they are requesting 1,500 cubic meters at a pumping rate of 0.5 meters per second, which when you say it like that, boy, it doesn't 1,500 cubic meters. That doesn't sound like that much unless you actually break it down into real context. 1,500 cubic meters is 1.5 million liters of water that they want to use for drilling as the province heads into what many are anticipating, particularly in southern Alberta, to be a catastrophic drought period. But let's take 1.5 million liters of water so that Northback, who's done all of this amazing PR work and who apparently has the full-throated support of Brian Jean and Danielle Smith, let's make that happen. And to really put as fine of a point as possible on how messed up this situation is, if we were to take a look at the recent renewables moratorium, let's say that Northback, instead of wanting to mine coal that could leach all sorts of crap into the water supply, instead of that, Northback wanted to put up some wind turbines, or Northback wanted to put up solar. Under provincial regulations, they would not be allowed to. Let me just say that again. If Northback or any other organization wanted to go to one of these mine sites, even if they said, hey, you know what? We get that there's some remediation to be done. Tell you what, we're going to do the remediation. But what we'd like to do is set up some wind turbines and some solar in that whole area when we're done. That's cool, right? They wouldn't be allowed to do that on this site. But a coal mine that's going to have all kinds of negative environmental effects, including leaching selenium. And to be clear, that 1.5 million liters of water that I just talked about, that's not 1.5 million liters of water for the project. That's 1.5 million liters of water just to drill a few holes. If they get to the point where they're actually going to pursue the coal mine, if Danielle Smith and the UCP greenlight this because there is insufficient public outcry, if that's what happens, the volume of water is going to make 1.5 million liters of water look like a literal drop in a bucket. That's what's going on with Grassy Mountain. And it's worth highlighting, that's only one of the 4 projects that Danielle Smith and Brian Jean have said, nah, they're advanced projects. It's cool. We're going to exempt them from the ministerial order. We've seen in this province that when people get motivated, when people get loud, they can make the government blink. And if we start to see enough outcry against this irresponsible move, this project that the province of Alberta, let me just say this again to be super clear, Kenney and Trudeau governments both agreed that the damage that this project would cause to the environment wasn't worth it. I just want to say that one more time. The governments led by Jason Kenney and Justin Trudeau agreed on a thing, and it was that this mine is a bad idea. It's not worth it. It's not worth the environmental damage. It's not worth the impact on wildlife. It's just not worth it. To say nothing of the fact that most of the money made from this mine wouldn't be staying in Alberta. I mean, sure, they'd probably pay for the occasional Easter egg hunt and ladies' night at the golf course that they bought. But most of the money is going to go back to the billionaire in Australia.